Raider Nation, what is going on? Eddie Paskal here in beautiful Henderson, Nevada. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Upon Further Review, brought to you by the good people at Coors Light. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do something a little bit different on the show today. Now, you guys know we're in full off-season mode. And while the off-season is such a fickle beast for us, because on one end, we don't get a chance to talk about games that are going on. We don't talk about how many yards Derek Carr threw for, how many sacks Matt Crosby had. And that's a bummer. That bums me out. But a good thing about the offseason is we get to try new things. We get to experiment. We get to kind of flex our creative muscle a little bit, which frankly is a good thing. It's good for all of us. It's good for you guys as the viewers, the listeners, whatever. You get to kind of push us out of our comfort zone. And so today, on Upon Further Review, brought to you by Coors Light, we are going to focus solely on From the Ground Up. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with From the Ground Up is an incredible, I would say, documentary series that we host on our YouTube channel, and it focused solely on the construction of Allegiant Stadium and essentially its transformation from a literal pile of dirt in the desert, right off the strip, to the beautiful, modern, sleek, frankly, gorgeous building that we know and love today. So today on Upon Further Review, we are going with the double feature. We are going to start our first conversation of the day will be with Lawrence Porter, who is one of the producers of the show, who is literally on the ground, getting things ready, putting things in position, helping document this incredible journey of a stadium. And then after that, we're bringing the big guns in. We're bringing in Tom Blanda, Senior Vice President of Stadium Development and Operations for your Las Vegas Raiders, who also was featured in the series. So if you watch the show on YouTube, you will recognize Tom. But in addition to that, was an integral part in making sure that this stadium, that this dream, that this vision ultimately came to fruition. So I would be remiss if I did not mention to you guys that the final episode of From the Ground Up debuts this evening on the Raiders YouTube channel, and I would implore all of you to not only watch the finale episode, which we're going to talk about in just a second with Lawrence, but to catch up on all the episodes that you may have missed, because, and I mean this sincerely, yes, I did watch them because I enjoyed them, but they are really, really good. They are informative. You will learn a lot about everything involved in this stadium. And to top it all off, they're narrated by Mike Rowe. So what more do you want? Dirty Jobs guy. Doesn't get any better than that. So without further ado, let us get this train rolling. Let's build this stadium of a podcast. Let's do it. So first up, as I said, producer of From the Ground Up, our very own Lawrence Porter. And as I said, look, Lawrence was very generous with his time. He has such an insightful, creative mind, a very unique way at looking at this project because he watched the project. And when I talk about the project, I mean the actual stadium. He watched the project get built, but also he is a creator, he is a creative type, and he got to put together this incredible documentary that really focused on all that. So, without further ado, enjoy our conversation with Lawrence Porter. We are joined today by a special guest for a special episode of Upon Further Review, producer of From the Ground Up, Lawrence Porter. And Lawrence, man, thank you for hanging out with us. And we were talking before we started rolling that usually you're the guy interviewing. So is it kind of funky to be on the other side of the table here?
100%. And thanks for having me on here today. It's an honor to be here, and it's fun to talk about the show. I've invested a lot of my time and life into that, so it's great to talk about it. So
yeah, and as we kind of come to the ending, which I'm sure is kind of bittersweet for me, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to start at the beginning, right? And you look at kind of the totality of this project, starting with essentially the ground and building this incredible, beautiful stadium that we've all come to know and love. But when you found out that this was going to be the project, that this is kind of the scope of work that you were being asked to do, what were you thinking? What was the thought process for you?
Well, I had done work with Tito Taberti and the Taberti Construction Group. They've been here from way back to the beginning with Nellis Air Force Base. And Tito is on the authority board, the stadium authority board. And so I kind of reached out to him. He's a construction guy. And I was like, Tito, man, somebody's got to cover this. Because we weren't even sure at that point if the Raiders were coming yet. They had formed the authority board, but there wasn't league approval yet. So it was still kind of up in the air. So he kind of got me in touch with Tommy White. I'm sure you've met Tommy White. He's a Las Vegas character for sure. And then got introduced to Mark Bedane. And so we kind of worked on with Brad Finney this whole kind of project. And then when it was clear it was going to be happening, we started hitting the ground immediately in March of 2018. There was a little bit of groundbreaking back in November, but this is when they really started blowing up the caliche. And man, it's been something to have a front row seat to everything from blowing up the ground to raising that final piece of steel. It's been amazing.
Yeah, and you look at the first episode. I know we're starting at the beginning, and I promise we won't go episode by episode by episode. But you look at that first episode that you guys started this project off with, this series, and there's a portion of the show where we're talking about the parcel of the land. And Mark Bedane talks about there were so many, I think he said there were like close to 10 different parcels of land that the team was looking at to build the stadium. And they ultimately decided on the one right, off the strip that we are familiar with now. But when you were kind of in those early days of looking at, all these types of areas that the stadium could be, what kind of were your thoughts when you found out this is the place that the stadium was ultimately going to be built?
Well, there was a lot of initial backlash, if you will, from the local community. Like, why would you put this right next to all the strip properties? The traffic's going to be a nightmare. How are you going to get people in and out? And I was not knowing a lot at that point. I was probably sort of in that camp too. But once Mark Bedane and Tom Blanda and Don Webb started walking us through in that first episode why this was chosen and the proximity to all of the amenities that are on the strip and the fact you've got that walkover bridge on Hacienda that 20,000 people are going to come walking across that bridge game day, and the fact that they looked at the ingress and egress and we're getting people in and out of that place, I was just blown away at how much they really had thought about this. And there were some big lots available down by South Point. You could be further south, you could be further west, But having the proximity to the strip and all of that traffic, being able to get there that easily, I was just blown away at how much they had thought this through. And I'm like, I was a convert, man. I was like, this is the only place you could put this stadium.
And you look at, throughout the duration of the series, it shows really the nitty-gritty of this stadium being built, from going from an empty parcel of land, of sand and dirt and whatever it is, to this incredible, modern, beautiful stadium. And when you had a chance, you and your team and the crew, to kind of cover all this stuff, you covered everything, essentially. And when you think back to some of the, I guess I'm just thinking like in scale, some of the biggest moments, I mean, what are some of the biggest, like, I guess, construction, like, oh my God, how are they going to pull this off moments that you guys got to cover? I imagine there are at least a couple.
Yeah, the first thing that we had to do as a crew was make the safety folks, they didn't really want us there, to be honest, initially, because, I mean, who wants to be filmed every day or every week as you're doing your job, right? I certainly don't. But, once we earned their trust and they realized we weren't going to get ourselves killed and weren't going to interfere with anything else going on, they sort of relaxed a bit and let us kind of go where we wanted to. And gosh, some of the stuff that was all the concrete that went into that thing, and being able to go up into the elevator cores all the way to the top of it when there was like nothing around you was pretty trippy. The steel structure is just amazing. It's all customized, heavy steel, lifting those big roof sections on. That blew my mind. Of course, the cable net, trying to raise those cables up, and then being able to actually walk on the netting when they were putting the plastic roof on top of that and watch how that whole structure came together. That was pretty mind-blowing. The torch is amazing.
Yeah.
The largest 3D printed assembled thing ever done. It's twice as big as the last one that's ever been done. That was amazing to see come together. So the list goes on, man. There's a lot of cool stuff in that building.
And it's funny because obviously we've had a chance to, from a distance, not even from a distance, but I've got a chance to watch the series like a fan, like everyone else has, which has been a lot of fun. And I think one of the big things, one of my biggest takeaways outside of like all the small little pieces that go in, like this incredible number of pieces that go into building the stadium, I think one thing that really stood out for me was I always have prided myself on kind of knowing what I'm not good at and the things that like I couldn't do. And like I couldn't be a construction guy or gal. I would love to give it the college try, but I know in my heart of hearts that I couldn't do it. But there were so many moments throughout this series where I was just kind of in awe of those group of people, of working together, of figuring this thing out in the hot Vegas sun. Like, I imagine that you had such a unique view of seeing them do what they do best throughout this, 2.5 year process.
It was cool. I think I'd mentioned to you earlier, too, the idea that we got to go in a lot of places that, if somebody's working on one particular part of the building, they don't get to see the depth that we got to see. We went and watched everything get built, which was kind of cool. I mean, even the grass, like we went down where they harvested the grass down in Arizona, and to see what went behind the science that was in this. And that's something that really impressed me about construction in general. It's changing quite a bit. Something you didn't see that you might see in a little bit later is we did a feature on robotics. They did a robot test run on this thing. It was the first time robotics have been used in construction in this way. And so like there's a lot of cutting edge technology. So it's not just about swinging a hammer anymore. You know, these guys are technicians as much as anything. So that really blew me away at their skill set of what they're able to do.
You know, and like you said, where it is very 2020, I guess we could say 2020 at the time, but it was very 2020 where, like you said, there's certainly a modern technological aspect to the building of the stadium. And I don't think that's unique to Allegiant. That's probably any big build these days. But there's still such kind of that, I don't want to say simple, but there's still such a physical aspect of going out there and physically building a stadium that I was like, man, that's pretty cool to just go in there. Like, were you surprised at all by like kind of how kind of in the weeds these folks had to get in building this beautiful building?
Oh, for sure. And the physicality of that, you take the especially like they call them the rod busters, the guys who do all the have to tie off every one of those joints and all that rebar. You know, in the hot 115 degree. They actually brought cooling chambers out where if someone felt a little overheated, it was like a little mini chamber they could go into and had air conditioning and water and they could cool off. So the safety record on this is unprecedented for how well the construction companies manage that, which is impressive unto itself. Because like you've been out in the heat here, man, it gets bloody hot.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to watch them do like hanging off of that steel, and they're up there hours, you know. It's impressive, man. Those are impressive people.
Did you get to try the cooling chamber? I gotta ask.
I stepped in there, sure.
Yeah,
it was
it
hot.
nice? Yeah. So I imagine it's kind of like being in one of those just a huge ice box, right?
Pretty much, yeah. You should put some of those on the field, but the players would love it too.
I'm sure they would. You know, we get through this process, right? And we're building this stadium, and things are looking good. And then it feels like overnight we snap, and we're living in this world of COVID. We're living in this world of what are we allowed to do? What's safe to do? How are we going to make sure everyone is safe and healthy? So how did COVID and doing this project throughout the pandemic, I imagine that it was kind of like two worlds. It was the world of making this project pre-COVID, and then it was making this project in the world of COVID.
Right. Some interesting things happened there. We were allowed to hang up to the last minute and continue to shoot. And then we got kicked out around like March to April is when we got kicked off of the site. And the thing was really nothing could endanger the construction process on this. They would not allow anything to happen to delay this to the point where it might not have opened on time for the season. And as it was explained to me, you know, with the construction process, this stuff is such a small site that things were coming in just in time. And if you start to interrupt that flow, it's very difficult to turn that back on again. So it was adamant that this has to get done on time. And so we got to come back on about May to June area. So we missed a couple of months of some things in there, but we still were capturing some things. And man, what they had to do, you know, construction guys work close to each other. You know, it's hey, let's all grab this board and put it up. They couldn't do that. They had to stay with 6 to 8 foot separation. They had to re-engineer how they do construction for the COVID. It was a challenge for those guys, and they really rose to it.
You know, this might seem like a silly question, but did the fact of doing this through COVID, did it change how you were able to produce, how you and your team were able to create this project?
For the filming aspects, sure. You know, there were a couple pieces of things that we missed that we couldn't film just because we weren't allowed on site, and we didn't want to be the cause of stopping a $2 billion stadium construction. You know, that's the last thing we're going to do. But once we were able to get on site, you know, there's the whole protocols you have to go through. Our crew got smaller. We had to think more efficiently on how we were going to manage capturing what we could capture. And then where we could go was a little more restricted as far as how we could access being near people and stuff like that. So, yeah, it changed how we operated a little bit too.
We're here with Lawrence Porter, producer from The Ground Up. And Lawrence, we look at this final episode that just came out as we record this a few hours ago, right? And we end on the art of Allegiant Stadium, which I think was really kind of an appropriate ending to the series. At least it felt like an appropriate ending from where I'm sitting, right? I'm just a novice. I'm just a novice fan here, right? But when you look at the art, and it just seems like it was something that is so unique to not only the stadium, but so unique to Vegas and this community, and it really did. I think my biggest takeaway was you watch it, and yes, it's a stadium for a football team. Yes, Allegiant is going to be home to the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're going to play 8, 10, whatever it is, games there every year, hopefully more if we go to the playoffs. But this is a building for the community, and it felt like there was such a community aspect, and everything in that art project, that whole installation was very well thought out from A to Z.
I would agree. I think, you know, you've got Rebecca and Cammie are featured from the Raiders team who helped implement this. And then Michael Goddard is the local artist who was kind of chosen to curate this whole thing because of his relationships with the artists in the local market. Yeah, I mean, I think to look at what those what the construction folks did as artisans and to treat this as art. And I mean, football is art. There's an art to playing the game, right? So I think to try to tie all of that together, and then what they did visually, the way they looked at both the football and Raiders history, Las Vegas and that history, and tied all that together within the art program, sometimes within an individual painting, you have those things going on. I think it was just really an apropos way to look at that. And it's an amazing collection. Over 70 artists worked on it. Most of them were local. That was kind of the mandate. And in fact, most of the people who worked on the building were local. And that was something, if I could make that point real quick to kind of segue to something else just for a sec.
Yeah, absolutely.
70% of the workforce was from the Vegas and greater Vegas area. And I think that's important because something Don Webb said along the way was, it's one thing to go to the games and enjoy them as a local, but when you were part of building it, that's a legacy project for those folks. And this town feels like this is a legacy project. And they're going to be there with their grandkids saying, hey, I put those steel beams in. It creates that tie in those moments that I think are really important. And then to bring that back, I mean, the art of the building is just, it's another one of those ways that I think the community is just going to look at that and go, that's us. This is us. And that's important. I think that's important for those connections.
1,000%. I think it all kind of comes back to kind of the crux of what Mark Davis has said since we got here, and really before we got here. But this is going to be home for the entire Raider Nation, but this is also going to be such a, like you said, a legacy piece for this area, for Las Vegas, for the Las Vegas metro area. And it was really refreshing for me to see on that first viewing that, like, hey, this is going to mean so much. Like, you saw, like, some of the artists, right, that you guys were fortunate enough to talk to. You saw how much it meant to them to be, not only to just have their art hanging, but to even be asked, like, hey, do you guys want to, participate? Do you want to be a part of this? And it was really cool to see that kind of human connection. Because we look, I know we kind of fall in this trap sometimes too, where you look at these guys on the field, and there's a part of them that feels a little inaccessible, right? They're kind of that ultra elite, incredible athlete, and they wear the helmets, and you can't really see them. But with the art part of it, like, that's about as intimate gets.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's absolutely true. And it was neat to see, like, not all of them were necessarily at that point Raiders fans, but I think obviously for the ones who were, that was an incredibly special thing for them to get to participate in this program. But for the ones who weren't, I think it even, it converted them a little bit to be like...
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. The nation's always growing, right?
Exactly. Do you, and I know that you had such a unique kind of seat for seeing all these art installations put in and all this kind of stuff. Do you have a favorite piece at all? Is there one that when you think about that portion of the project that you're like, that one was pretty cool?
I loved Daniel Esparza. He mentions he might be a little autistic in his thinking. He does this incredibly detailed work. He does photorealistic painting too, which is interesting. But I just think the way his mind works and watching him put that down on paper and like looking at the original sketch, you're like, I don't see anything there. And then you come back and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? That was one of my favorite pieces. And there were some other cool ones. There's some neat dimensional work that was done with the torch that I thought just visually just was stunning. I don't know, man. There's a lot of great work in there.
I know. It's kind of a loaded question, and I got to ask you too. Mike Rowe has been the voice of this project. What was it like to work with Mike?
He is so fast, so good. I think I'll tell you the funny story. First time I talked to him, I'd never met him. He's Mike Rowe, dirty jobs guy. So I just want to kind of break the ice. So I after he did his reading and his nice Mike Rowe deep voice, I said to him, Mike, that was great, but can we get a little more Tom Cruise next reading? And he paused for a moment. I said, I'm just messing with you, man. So,
but it's important to break the ice sometimes, right? You got to look.
Sure.
He's just a guy like us.
Absolutely,
he's a human being.
I'm
sure he appreciates. Yeah, he did sometimes dirty jobs, but
I think he's being paid a little more, but that's all right. One day.
Exactly. Got to have goals, right?
Absolutely.
But we come to the end of this project, and it ends on such a, it was obviously an optimistic note, but it ends on a note of, hey, come see us. We're not going anywhere, right? I mean, the construction part of it is done, but this building isn't going anywhere. We're going to be here for a very, very long time. But for you as a producer, for you and your squad that did such an incredible job of bringing this project to life over the past 2+ years, is it a little bittersweet for you now that the building is done, it's open, it's beautiful, and hopefully sooner than later it's going to be welcoming a lot of Raiders fans into its doors?
Absolutely. I've never worked on anything as long as this. And there were moments when we were out on the site And I tried to be conscious of this because these moments don't come along in life every day, right? And so I tried to be standing at that moment, looking at that sun coming up as they're doing that concrete pour or whatever that moment was, just to go, hey, let's soak this in for a minute, because you're seeing something not a lot of people get to see, but it's that moment in life just like where you want to be able to remember that one little sunrise or whatever it was. So, yeah, to get to the end of it, and it's like, well, not having the people come in is just a whole other level of sort of a bittersweet, you know? I think it would have been different if that had opened that first day and the crowds were there, and it would have been a big celebratory thing, but it opened kind of inauspiciously.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping this season's going to be the one that has that moment that we're looking for. But yeah, it's like, you know, it's kind of like you toil away on editing and stuff, you know, you're in your little room doing stuff, and it's kind of like it's over now, and it's a little sad for me. I got to be honest. I spent a lot of my life is in that building too, so.
You know, it's funny where you bring that up of trying to be cognizant of those moments, and in the before times, as I like to call them, I would try to do that every road game that we went to. We're like, man, you know, we're standing here on the field at Lambeau or Arrowhead, wherever it is, and you're like, this is pretty cool. You know, like if you would have told me at 13 that this is what I would be doing, like, sign me up for that. But I totally resonate with you when you say, you try to be cognizant of those moments and just remember them, because, you know, I think if the past year has taught us anything, that I think we all got to do a pretty good job of savoring those moments, because you never know how long it's going to be until another one comes up.
Yes. And, you know, I think, you know, you talk about Lambeau and some of the classic stadiums. This is now one of them.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some kid who's 13 who's going to say, if you would have told me that I was standing at Allegiant Stadium on the sidelines and see Derek Carr make that thing and get to interview him or whatever that thing is, you know, this stadium is now in that category of those stadiums, I think.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, if, you know, on a personal, I've had so many of my friends and be like, hey, man, like, when are we going to be able to come out to the stadium? I want to come out to a game. And I think they say they want to see me, like, oh, I haven't seen you in so long. But I know in my heart of hearts that they want to enjoy a nice weekend in Vegas. They want to go to a game. They want to bask in the greatness that is Allegiant Stadium. So, you know, it's, like you said, it's going to be a building that's going to create so many memories for so many people. And it's very cool that you were able to be a part of that. But as we wrap it up, Lawrence, best interview, most entertaining interview. You only get one. That's the rule. You get one interview. What's the one that you will remember?
Probably Tom Blanda.
Oh, my guy. I love to hear that.
Yeah, I got to say, he was a little crusty at first, but that's just Tom, as I've gotten to know him. But, yeah, he always had an interesting way of bringing it down to the everyman's level. He loves drawing all the diagrams on the whiteboard and stuff. I think he was the most fun to interview of everybody that we interviewed, because he always brought something unexpected to the table.
I love to hear that. Well, Lawrence, congratulations. I mean this so sincerely.
Thanks.
Where it was just an incredible project, you know, literally from just a guy who gets to watch the videos on YouTube. It's been so much fun to follow along with it. Like I said, I think the ending was kind of the perfect ending, very appropriate way to kind of finish on the torch and kind of, you know, showing this off as a piece of work. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to the team. I know a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it. I know a lot of challenges over the past year have come up. I know it has been a year not short on challenges. So congratulations on a job well done, and thank you for coming to hang out with us.
Appreciate it much, man. I'm glad it was so well received by the Raider Nation, and look forward to the next chapter.
Absolutely. So Raider Nation, go out there and make sure you check out the final episode of From the Ground Up, premiering on our YouTube channel and wherever you catch your other previous From the Ground Up episodes. Make sure you check it out, because, like I said, a very, very good series and an appropriate way to kind of finish it. So Lawrence Porter, thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks. I appreciate it, man.
And a big, sincere thank you to Lawrence. And as I said, make sure you guys go and check out his work, the work that him and his team have done over the past 2+ years. It is really incredible, and it paints the perfect picture, I think, of Allegiant Stadium. But as I said at the top of the show, we are going heavy today, boys and girls. We are rocking and rolling. So our second interview, and you hear that in just a second, is with Tom Blanda, Senior Vice President of the Stadium Development and Operations for your Las Vegas Raiders. And Tom, very much like Lawrence, very generous with his time, talking through the project of Allegiant Stadium, his involvement in From the Ground Up, and really his major takeaways from the past 2.5 years, and really even longer of his life. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation with Tom Blanda. Tom Blanda. And Tom, so we were talking before, what we're essentially doing is we're putting a beautiful bow on From the Ground Up, something that you were involved with in terms of Lawrence and his creative process, but then also the physical building of this beautiful stadium. So let me ask you this. Was there any hesitation for you when you found out that this incredible project, the entirety of this project, was going to be essentially a documentary that you were going to be involved in?
No hesitation whatsoever. There was a lot of nervousness, I think, because as folks probably found out, I'm not a construction person. I'm a Los Angeles, Oakland, Las Vegas Raider, somebody who's been with the organization for 30 years. We've carried the stadium dream for decades, and we knew what we wanted to go into the stadium, but we hired experts to do that work. And so along the process of creating from the ground up, I probably gained a college education level understanding of the process of building a stadium. So I'm thankful to everybody that was around me. I'm thankful to Mark Davis and Mark Bedane for allowing me and giving me the trust that they did to interact with these folks. We trusted the experts. We brought in the people we knew who could handle the job. So a lot of times I felt I was along for the ride, but I really benefited by gaining education about the construction process and about stadiums. And in return, I was able to give them some education about the Raiders brand, Raiders history, certainly the preferences of ownership and the leadership group inside the Raiders. So it was a great relationship, and it just worked well both ways.
So going back, I guess, to the very beginning of the project, you find out, hey, Las Vegas is a go. We're building this stadium. What is the first thing that pops into your head? Is it excitement? Is it nervousness? Is it a combination of all two, or what?
Oh, it's disbelief. I'm standing here on a 62.5 acre parcel of property here in Las Vegas. It's covered with tumbleweeds. We've got to do some geotech work, which means we've got to be convinced that this parcel can contain a stadium and all the nuances associated with it when it comes to electrical and box culverts and what we thought was a fault line on the south of the property. We just weren't sure it was going to go off. And then as we started to scratch a little bit deeper and understand that this was falling together, we gained more and more confidence. But in the very beginning, it was disbelief. We had that false start there in Carson. We were pretty close to beginning, and we didn't get the vote from the NFL. And then we pivoted here to Las Vegas, and everything just fell into place. The geotech worked. And so we started to believe very soon as we went through what we called the geotech process, that this was indeed coming together. And then once we formed the joint venture and got the vote and partnered up with the state, partnered up with our great partners in the Sands in the beginning, and Sheldon Adelson and all those folks, it just took off from there. So it was light speed. Every day seemed like a month went by.
One of the things that Lawrence and his team really focused on in kind of the early episodes of the series was the parcel that you just mentioned. And he talked about how many different parcels were kind of in play, and ultimately what led to the decision to build on the one that obviously Allegiant Stadium was birthed on. What was that process like for all you guys, trying to make sure that this parcel was the parcel?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of influences in the process. As you could imagine, the location of a stadium is going to drive a lot of business activity, but along with it, a lot of concerns when it comes to traffic and other perhaps negatives that might fall into what I would consider a relatively short negative list. But as we looked at over 11 different sites for stadium properties, and Mark Bedane really suffered the brunt of this by entertaining phone calls from people who had preferences about where a stadium would be from either a traffic viewpoint or from a more of a situational location orientation to the casinos. We knew we wanted to be part of the Strip, but we didn't want to interfere with the Strip's main business activities on a Thursday night if we had a primetime game. So the more and more we looked at sites, and the more and more we looked at the location that we're at now, being right across the 15 from all the casinos, it just settled in perfectly for us, and everybody else. All the different sites got weeded out because of their negative columns. This one just had a whole host of positives with very little negative associated.
And as we go throughout the series, I think Lawrence and his team did a really nice job of just showing how many things, how many little steps go into building a stadium. It seems like it was like, at least for me as kind of being a viewer, there's like 17 million small little steps that you have to do, small little projects that ultimately results in this beautiful stadium. But in terms of the scope and some of the, just physically big steps, were there any where you were like on site and you're like, oh my God, this is like pretty impressive just in terms of scale and physically people moving things around?
Well, absolutely. I think, excavation, when they started to move, you know, thousands of yards of dirt with the tractors and the earth moving vehicles where they graded the site. And then they started to blast the caliche. We realized that we were sort of moving mountains to situate the stadium where it needed to be situated at the elevation that it was situated, and the grade and everything else that we needed at the site. So yeah, real quickly, I think when you saw the steel folks come in, and then you saw the size of the pieces of steel that were being trucked in and how quickly they would lay those out and get those up and into the structure, you realize you were dealing with people who really truly could move mountains on a day-by-day basis, and they did.
I think one thing that really stuck out to me is you're watching this series, and it was kind of mind-boggling to me how kind of smooth and efficient all these teams are. Like these guys, these construction crews come in and they're doing their thing. They say, hey, this is the job for the day. This is how we're going to accomplish it. And boom, 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 here we go. And you're kind of, going through the process and the stadium's being built. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits, right? And all of our worlds collectively change. What was it like for you guys on your side of things? Was there ever a moment of like, how are we going to kind of finish this?
Well, interestingly, the stadium construction industry is very adept at pulling people in via video conference on the projects that they work on. There were times that we had people video conferencing from different countries, different time zones, lending their expertise to certain parts of the project. So I think when COVID hit, yes, we had to worry about hygiene and masks and testing and things like that. But the workers and their check-in process were disciplined enough to understand, one, the importance of what we were trying to accomplish, and that they just needed to, get through the process so that they could get to post and get their job done so they could get home at the end of the day. I think there was a lot of thankfulness that we were allowed to continue working. We were considered essential workers, and I think everybody was honored to be able to continue to even be working. So following the rules and working a little bit harder to adhere to the guidelines that were prescribed to us, no problem. I can't understate how appreciative everybody was that they were able to continue to work. And teleconferencing was a piece of cake to the stadium construction executive staff, because as I stated, they do this every day. They do it very well. They're very structured. They have schedulers that spend their entire days moving things around on the Gantt charts that show the timeline of progression for one project, which nests into another project. These people are very, very good at what they do. So we weren't set back much at all.
That's interesting. So you guys were essentially Zoom experts before we were all forced into becoming Zoom experts over the past, 12, 13 months, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm sure this is a question that maybe you'll have a better answer to 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you get a chance to kind of exhale and look back. But when you think about the past 2.5 years, 3 years, I guess now at this point, what's the biggest thing you learned throughout the process of the stadium construction?
Listen to the owner, listen to the leadership group, because I will tell you, in the end, they're going to get their way. Yes, we're dictated by budgets, but in the end, this is Mark Davis's building, and you've got to listen to the owner and deliver on the owner's vision. And I do feel like that was one of my key roles in the project, was to kick people back into alignment when varying opinions might have led us to slightly sway off of the vision of the owner. Whether we agree with him or not, it's Mark Davis's brand. It's the Raiders. There's a lot of history here, and you have to listen to him. It's not your house. You can go home and design your own house if you'd like. Sometimes you don't agree with some of the decisions, but you have to move forward and stay focused on delivering the vision of the owner, somebody who's had these ideas in their head for 30 years. And it was important that we kept everybody in alignment.
I'm just wrapping up here with Tom Blanda. And Tom, did you do anything to celebrate when the stadium was officially done?
Well, when the stadium was officially done, we had a Monday Night Football game.
Yeah, it's true.
And I do have a COVID story for you. I came in to do a test the day of, because we had to do COVID testing to come into the building for event days. And I received a false positive. So after, waiting 20 something years to build a stadium, we had our first event, and I got to celebrate the first use of the stadium for a Monday Night Football game by being escorted off the site because of the false positive. That pulled my entire staff off the site as well because of their contact with me. So we haven't yet been able to celebrate the conclusion or the finishing up of this project. And I think we'll do that this year in alignment with Mark Davis, because we don't feel this stadium is completely done until we can fill this stadium with fans, with Raider fans that we built this stadium for, who use their money to purchase PSLs and pick out their seats. We just can't wait to host them. And I think that after we conduct a first event inside this building with 60,000 screaming Raiders fans, I think that'll be our cause for celebration. And that evening, hopefully we win that football game. We'll go have a great meal, probably a steak dinner, because Mark Davis created somewhat of a tradition here at the stadium of a steak dinner, signifying the finishing up of the project. We haven't had that steak dinner yet. We're going to do that after we have that first NFL football game inside our stadium to a sellout crowd.
I like that. That sounds very, very good to me. Well, Tom, the last one for you. Is there any sense of this being kind of bittersweet? Because this was such a big part of your life for 2-3 years, and I know that the stadium never really is done, right? There's always things to do. There's always events to host, but this chapter of your life essentially comes to an end now. Is there any? Are you nostalgic for it all, you think?
Well, yeah, I'm nostalgic, but at the same time, we still haven't had that first event, and I think I'll be the most nostalgic after this. Maybe this season goes by and we host, Grammy award-winning concerts. We host home football games, hopefully a home playoff game to a sellout crowd. I think that's the time to get nostalgic. Yeah, we'll be able to replace some floor tiles here and there, but I think the heavy lifting will be done. But we certainly do look forward to building things like the Raiders Hall of Fame and other ancillary development projects that the Raiders have in mind. And stay tuned for the Raiders to continue to sprout up here around Las Vegas to just continue to further our partnership with this community.
That's a great tease, and that's a great thing to end on. Very well done. See, Tom, you are a pro. This isn't your first rodeo. Well, hey, Tom, we appreciate you so much, and congratulations to you and the team. I know that it still feels like we have so many things to accomplish, like you said, having fans in that building, but it's a beautiful building. We're very, very excited. We're very grateful that we have this. So, like I said, congratulations to you and the squad, and thanks for coming to hang out with us today.
Thank you very much, and go Raiders.
And I really do appreciate Tom's time. Tom is a very, very busy man, so I am humbled that he carved out a few minutes for our little program here at HQ. So a big thank you to Tom. And we're putting a bow on it this week, fellas, boys and girls. Tom Blanda, Lawrence Porter from the ground up. What more do you guys want? So for Eddie Paskal, Engineer Jim, our guests this week, Lawrence Porter and Tom Blanda, our pal Alexandra behind the glass, making us sound so much better than we do in real life, and everybody else at Silver and Black Productions who helps get our little program from A to Z, we thank you deeply, humbly, and oh so sincerely. And I tell you guys every week, Raider Nation, stay safe, stay healthy, keep wearing your mask and doing everything that you need to do so we can get back to normal life sooner than later. And in that spirit, we will catch you guys next week for another episode of Upon Further Review.